Hello and welcome back to this damnful idealistic crusade. This will be a short video going over the titles I picked up in Kino Lorber's recent site sale, which was, as usual, quite massive. So this is an odd mixture of horror titles for October, some older titles I've been wanting to check out, and some newer releases with some including 4K masters I was really curious about that were significantly discounted in the sale. So I didn't get as many titles as I wanted to, as usual with Kino sales, because they license so much it's impossible for your wallet to keep up with everything you'd like to see. And also, so many other labels have been having sales that I did have to sort of spread my money around a little bit. I'll start with the titles for my director's collections. This first one I was most interested in. This is a new release from Kino, and it's from a new 4K master. That is for the John Ford picture, The Horse Soldiers, which has had a number of releases on home video. And even though it's generally regarded as lesser quality Ford and more of a problematic film in terms of its script, it's still full of interesting Ford touches, and you have the great Bill Holden and John Wayne, and it's a Civil War film. So, of course, I return to this film quite often when I'm revisiting Ford's canon of work, if you will. This is a new 4K master. It has a special slipcase. It is at least somewhat advanced over the MGM master that previously was released on Blu-ray, which I have in the John Wayne box. But this does have a new Joseph McBride commentary as well, which I'm really looking forward to. I'd wanted to get this since it came out, but I did want to make sure the new master was worth it, and it does look like it at least advances in a number of areas, and it's, one would wish this had gotten a 4K UHD release as well, but it's I don't know if this had an HDR grading, or, obviously it is much more of a catalog title. It probably would not sell as much, although you would want every Ford title to be available in 4K UHD if possible. The slipcover, as Kino does, is quite nice. It is nicely printed, and it does give at least a slightly premium quality feel to what is otherwise a standard Kino release, but from a new 4K master. So this is something I'm really looking forward to, particularly McBride's audio commentary. And I do think it is a bit of an underrated film. It isn't perfect by any means, but it's a film I do enjoy coming back to every once in a while. This next one, also a new release with a slipcover. This is for the Don Siegel picture Stranger on the Run, which is a Western I've never gotten to see from 1967, so I was really excited to check this out. It's credited as being from a new 2K scan of The Inner Positive, and it has a brand new commentary by Gary Giannini in addition to the broadcast trailer of the film. Again, the slipcover gives it a nice premium feel, even though it's just the usual standard Kino release underneath. And all of these releases, the slipcovers are almost always limited, so if you're curious about it or you want to get the slipcover, you will want to order sooner rather than later. I'm not too big on the slipcovers. It's a nice sort of premium thing for titles, but I'm not as crazy about them as some people might be. They are well done, but I will say I did have. I had to contact their customer service department, who once again wowed me. This is only the second time I've had to email them about anything, but when I got my copy from the sale, the slipcover was fully creased down the front and very damaged, so being a completist, if something has a slipcover, I like to have it. And so I just sent them an email saying, it's not the end of the world, but, if you had any spares, could I perhaps get one, and expecting, get a response within a reasonable amount of time, because they had many sale orders from other people who probably had bigger issues than just a crushed slipcover. But once again, as the same experience I had before with their customer service department, I got a response almost immediately, and I'd sent them a picture of it, and they just sent me this replacement. No hassle, no frills, no hoops to jump through. So once again, I have to say their customer service is absolutely fantastic. So if you ever have any problems, just send an email to their order support, and they'll get you taken care of very quickly, which I was very pleasantly surprised by. So again, I've only had to contact them for different things twice now, and both times the turnaround time and the ease of communication and the whole process was extremely easy, and again, very much not what I'm accustomed to with a lot of labels here in the U.S. Their customer service is fantastic. So I now have this copy with the perfect slipcover. So again, if you're interested in the slipcovers, they do sell out relatively quickly, and it's best to order directly from Kino once the release comes out, closer to the release date if you're interested in the slipcovers. Next is for my William Wellman shelf. This is another film I've always wanted to see, never gotten around to it yet, and this is one of the titles that was actually marked very low, so that made it even more tempting. Most Kino sale titles are around $7.99 to $10 or $11.99, which is still a significant discount, but there are occasionally ones mixed in that drop below that. So when titles are $5.49 or $5.99, then it's really tempting, and you have to try to not order all of them and go beyond what you can afford. But this is the 1934 film Stingaree, which is, I guess, sort of a quasi-Western, but it pairs Richard Dix with the great Irene Dunne, and seems like such an interesting combination that it's been on my watch list for some time. This is credited as a new 2K restoration, and it seems to have been in conjunction with Lobster Films because their logo is on the back. It carries a new William Wellman Jr. commentary, who's done a number of tracks on his father's films, but otherwise it's just a standard Kino disc. It does include a trailer gallery, but I don't know if that means it has the film's trailer or not. But again, this was just so inexpensive, and again, a newer restoration and a film I've always wanted to see that it seemed like a must. Next are the horror-related titles that I wanted to chip away at for October. This first one I've been wanting to see because it is, to date, the best version of the film, and I wanted to compare it to the Laserdisc release and some of the other transfers that exist and restorations that exist of this film. And also because the one of the previous releases was missing, at least on DVD, was missing a portion of the film, was missing, I think, about 5 minutes. And that's the 1920 silent version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with the great John Barrymore in one of his most iconic screen performances. Again, this is from a newer restoration. It is currently, to date, the best version of the film, and it doesn't frequently go on sale, so that's why I really wanted to check it out, because I've been diving into the other Jekyll and Hyde versions in preparation for Warner Archive releasing the 1931 Ruben Mamoulian version this year, again, from a new scan. So I thought it was perfect timing to finally look at the newest and the Blu-ray release of the Barrymore 1920 version. So again, this is a Kino Classics release, and it does have a nice amount of extras, the primary thing being selections or actual previous versions of Jekyll and Hyde versions. So there is the James Cruise starring 1912 silent version. There's a 15-minute cut of another 1920 version, and then even a Stan Laurel slapstick parody from 1925. There's a new score for this by the Mont Alto Motion Picture Orchestra, and again, I've been wanting to check this out for some time and look at the best modern restored version of the film and compare it to others. I just hadn't gotten around to getting this yet, so I was very happy it was included in the sale this time around. Some others I've wanted to get for some time. I, of course, had to chip away at the other Bela Lugosi vehicles. This one's really interesting because it is a Library of Congress restoration. It's a film that was not really available in any decent version for the longest time, and it is one of the sort of Poverty Row vehicles that tries to get some of the Universal mojo by bringing over a lot of its stars. So this is 1932's The Death Kiss, which, as I alluded to, stars Bela Lugosi, Edward Van Sloan, and David Manners. This is a Library of Congress restoration. It's designated by the sort of label that Kino gives, or at least used to give, to these type of releases on the sort of white or black cover background. It looks rather nice, and it has a new Richard Harlan Smith commentary, who always does great tracks. This, again, is a newer restoration, and it does include some original, or at least recreations of original hand-tinted moments in the film. So there is some color tinting in the film and would have been in the original release prints, and of course gone from most every other version. I've only seen this before in some really terrible versions, so I'm very much looking forward to the actual official cleaned up version, particularly since it has a great commentary and it's actually got a version of the hand tinting effect. This also meant that I grabbed 1940's The Devil Bat, which is another, of course, slightly later Bela Lugosi Poverty Row vehicle. This is one of the films we all love to watch, regardless of its quality, simply for Bela's commitment to every role he was ever in. And it does have a nice charm to it, even though it is very much a Poverty Row horror film from 1940, so you have to go in with your expectations generally lowered. This is a newer transfer. Again, this film was only available in a lot of really crummy public domain editions, like most of the Poverty Row films Lugosi would do in the 30s and 40s. So it's really nice to see this actually have a Blu-ray release. This is credited as a new HD master. I guess Kino was the one who did this, although it says some material was courtesy of Bob Furmanek at the 3D Film Archive. But there's a little tiny disclaimer saying that this was mastered from an archival 35mm print, with the exception of a 9-minute section derived from a 16mm element of lesser quality, which pretty much should be obvious. So this is pretty much a preservation attempt and seems to be the best available version of this film, but you will have to keep in mind that it is a mixture of elements, and some is taken from a 16mm reduction print. So do keep that in mind if that sort of quality drop-off can bother you. This also has another Richard Harlan Smith commentary, which I'm very much looking forward to. So I just figured it would make a perfect double feature with The Death Kiss, and it's just one of the Lugosi vehicles I've been wanting to get from Kino. I missed out on Invisible Ghost. That has gone out of print, unfortunately. So I decided to get some more of these before they started eventually drying up and going out of print, because these films have not had a good history on home video, so any sort of HD release and new scan with extras on a Blu-ray is, it's cause for celebration for Lugosi fans, but it's just for films like this, you just never expected them to hit Blu-ray. Of course, Lugosi was not the only horror icon who went to Poverty Row in 1940, because Boris Karloff wound up making The Ape at Monogram. This is a new 2K scan and credited as restoration. This is also in conjunction with the Library of Congress, but this is a later disc for Kino, so I guess they've dispensed with the sort of white and black restored banners on the cover. So here we just have the cover shot and then the standard Kino type of design. Again, this is a new 2K restoration, and it carries not one, but two audio commentaries. One, again, by Richard Harlan Smith, and then the other by the great Tom Weaver. So you basically get double your money's worth in terms of the extras. So that was another inducement to finally pick this up. And again, since I was already going into the cleaned up versions of Lugosi Poverty Row horrors, I figured, why not make it a triple bill with Karloff in The Ape? Another interesting fact that this film was also written, or at least co-written, by Kurt Siodmak, who wrote many of the classic Universal horrors and is a big name among classic horror circles. So yeah, I thought it would be interesting to revisit this film, which I only saw once a long, long time ago, and I don't think it was a very good version either. So I just figured it would be a perfect triple bill with the two Lugosi vehicles. Keeping the 1940 horror theme going, I guess, I had to get this because it's a 4K restoration, and it's also Ernst Schoedsack after King Kong and Son of Kong, and leading up to Mighty Joe Young, and it jumps more into science fiction territory, but I think it's safe to say it's a science fiction, horror, fantasy sort of combination, and that's 1940's Dr. Cyclops, which is credited as a special edition, but is a brand new 4K scan from Universal, and has another Richard Harlan Smith commentary, in addition to a Trailers from Hell piece and a trailer gallery. But this is a really interesting film that, I have not seen in years and years and years, and it definitely sort of predates what you see in Incredible Shrinking Man. And since I basically reacquainted myself with the power of that story and Matheson's novel and the great film, I thought it was perfect to look at this film again. And then finding out Kino was releasing this 4K restoration, and then it was included in the sale, just seemed like perfect timing. So for those who aren't familiar, Dr. Cyclops, from the co-director of King Kong, is essentially about a mad doctor who shrinks people and they have to try and survive. So it is very much a special effects heavy film, and for it being 1940 and being in color is extraordinarily impressive on a technical level, in addition to it being a classic, again, sort of horror, science fiction, fantasy combination. This is the type of film and blending of genres, and especially for it being a special effects heavy film that was not often made at this time, particularly not in 1940 and in color, just to complicate everything further. So it is an extraordinarily impressive film, and I can't wait to revisit it on this new restoration and check out the commentary and again see it from this beautiful new 4K presentation on Blu-ray. Moving to the last two titles, which are just standalones. This one, I admit, was one that caught my eye because, again, it was one of the ones very inexpensive in the sale, one of the ones at the sort of $5 tier. So I, of course, scoured through those, and the ones that were new scans or had commentaries and things that sort of jumped out to me more. But this one really did, because it is a 1928 silent film entitled 13 Washington Square. This is from a brand new 4K restoration, again, by Universal. Really nice artwork there. I've never seen this film, but I have read about it, or at least read the film referenced in regards to just seeing the title referenced here and there. So this will be a first-time watch for me. But again, the real draw was that it is a silent film with a brand new 4K restoration by Universal, and it's got a Nora Fiora commentary, who is one of my favorite modern commentators. If you heard me talk about her great commentary tracks on some Indicator releases, for example. So that was an extra inducement. Plus, the cover art is actually rather nice and isn't in the traditional black background, white text Kino label design. So that was a little interesting. Not to mention, in another rare touch, the disc label has the cover art. It's not just the standard Kino label. So that was really interesting. So this is, I guess, this film is getting treated more as a sort of special edition title, plus, being the recipient of a 4K restoration. So I guess that was the reason why. But it's nice to see that, because Kino rarely does that. Everything is mostly in their traditional design with the standard Kino label. So it just seemed like a more of a special deluxe release, and I couldn't resist with it being at the sort of $5.99 tier in the sale. And then last but not least, this was one of the absolute surprises of the year for me, that this film was not only getting a Blu-ray, but even getting released and in widescreen. This is a very obscure film that I read about growing up and is extraordinarily important for the development of the James Bond films, the Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman partnership, and Eon Productions. And that is 1960's Warwick production of The Trials of Oscar Wilde, starring Peter Finch as the legendary Oscar Wilde. This is a very handsomely mounted period drama about the famous trial that basically was the sort of beginning of the end for Wilde, and all about his personal turmoil and strife, and through the process of the libel suit that, again, eventually led to his imprisonment and eventual sort of self-implosion and internal destruction. This is, again, it was a Warwick production, so it was co-produced by Cubby Broccoli, and this film was a rather significant box office failure. There was another film about Wilde that came out about the same time, and they sort of competed with each other. And this film, while it did get some good reviews, and Peter Finch won a number of awards, and deservedly so, because he's fantastic here, it didn't really catch fire at the box office and help to drive another sort of final nail into the coffin of Warwick Productions. So Cubby Broccoli split with his partner, Irving Allen, and finally decided to do what he had really wanted to do and not been able to do for a number of years, which was get the rights to the James Bond novels. And that's what led to the partnership with Harry Saltzman, the development of Eon, and the starting of the series. Also important is there's a lot of key personnel and factors in regards to this film that trickle over into the Bond films, as all the Warwick films have. This is where a lot of the key team members first came into place and worked with Broccoli, and he knew that they were, phenomenal at what they did. This runs the gamut from Terrence Young to cinematographer Ted Moore, and especially production designer, the legendary Ken Adam, who designed the literal hell out of this film. And this is a real visual film experience, and particularly in the set design and the costuming and the color of everything is really impressive. And it's also in scope widescreen, and Warwick films were not typically made with large budgets, and they had made a number of black and white sort of more programmer type fare throughout the 1950s. So this was Warwick trying for more of an opulent prestige production, and it costing more and being in color and not really making a lot of money. That sort of was, this sort of the last straw. So this film is incredibly important for Bond fans, and for those who want to know more about the development of the series and the background history, and also how all the various elements came together. This has been a key film in all of that, and it has been really unavailable for a long time. Again, the fact that this even is now on Blu-ray is mind-boggling. I first had to track this down. I had to see a terrible pan and scan copy that came from somewhere, I don't know. So actually being able to finally see this film in widescreen will be a treat. Unfortunately, there are no special features, and it just seems like they got, I guess, since MGM is credited, they must have had some sort of widescreen master. So it's just a standard release. There are no extras, but this film's historical importance is being one of the major elements of the development of the James Bond film series, and this being a pretty much a big flop for Warwick, basically providing the impetus and the necessity of making money to overcome this failure, and then the dissolution of the partnership for Cubby Broccoli to double down on what he really wanted to do and finally get the James Bond films off the ground. So again, this film's importance is quite massive, and it is a very handsomely made film with a great cast, including James Mason as well. Brilliant Ken Adam production design, and you can see from this film alone why he got the job on Dr. No. And even though this was more of a prestige production, it still didn't have the biggest budget in the world. So mounting a prestige costume drama production like this on still not a huge, enormous budget, and it looking so fantastic is all a tribute to Ken Adams' design. It was also directed by Ken Hughes, who would, of course, later come back and do elements of the 1967 Casino Royale, and also direct Chitty Chitty Bang Bang for Cubby Broccoli later in the 60s. So, again, extraordinarily important for the James Bond connections and its historical place, and it's been a very painfully obscure film that's been very hard to track down for a long time. This does include a trailer, but it has the alternate, I believe, one of the U.S. titles, The Man with the Green Carnation. So that's another sign that this film has not been well treated, because it's got a bunch of different titles. It's been painfully obscure. So again, it was just a real shockingly wonderful surprise that Kino was releasing this and now has put it out on Blu-ray, which it now has a widescreen HD presentation, which is something I just never thought would happen. So there are the spines. So that's what I picked up in the Kino Lorber October sale this time around. Again, I had to limit myself because there have been so many sales recently that, I was having to sort of spread my money around a little bit. A lot of interesting titles were included this time because it was a massive amount. I think it was a little over 900 titles were included this time. And of course, there's also the ever-continuing going out of print sale for titles that they don't renew the license or lose the license to. So as always, these sales are wonderful times to stock up on titles that you're interested in, and you can do a lot of blind buys and things on titles that seem maybe interesting because the price is usually so low and you want to hit that free shipping threshold, that I find it's best to at least, every time a sale rolls around, you don't have to buy a whole lot of titles, but it is very helpful to at least chip away at a few like this one, just basically enough to get that free shipping threshold, and that way you can at least try to somewhat keep up with Kino's massive amount of titles that they release, because otherwise, if you don't do it for a while and then suddenly you look and there's 10,000 titles that you want to get, and you're like, I can't possibly do that. At least this way, or at least in my experience, or the way I look at things, it helps because, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 at a time, it's also a decent amount that you can go through, and you're not overloaded with, adding more to your never-ending gigantic to-watch pile that you seemingly never get done with. So at least this makes things a little, your watch time a little bit more feasible, and helps you, again, sort of chip away at Kino titles you might be interested in. So I hope this has been at least somewhat fun and informative to hear what I picked up in the Kino sale. If you picked up things in the Kino sale, or any of these seem interesting to you, or if you've looked at any of these discs, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, keep supporting boutique labels and studio labels by buying films on disc to help keep physical media alive. And thanks ever so much for watching.